Welcome to Six Figure Souls Doing Good and Making Money, the weekly podcast where I highlight entrepreneurs who have left the grind and designed a business in alignment with who they are. This is a very special season 9 where I'm interviewing my co-authors of our third collaborative book in the Ultimate Guide series called Leaving Your Legacy. I'm your host, Camille Miller, an internationally known strategist and life amplifier, founder of the Natural Life Business Partnership and the Soul Professional Society. Today, I have one of my co-authors with me, Elana Ray. And thank you, Elana, for coming to our podcast and talking to me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell our audience, not just me, our audience, a little bit about you, who you are, what you do in the world. And I would say share any gifts you have.
I'm sorry?
Share any gifts you might have.
Oh, yeah. So I guess you can say I'm a violinist, and I still am. But I'm a violinist who the universe threw a few curveballs to. And that resulted in me being other things besides only a musician. So I'm also now an energy and a sound healer and an author.
I love that. I love how the universe makes us dovetail our gifts.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so interesting how that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you can share with the audience a little bit about your story, how you got to where you are, and then I'm going to ask you why you decided to be in the book.
Okay, so I was very determined to be a violinist, and I had the most amazing mentor on earth. But meanwhile, I got a curveball, which is that it's a very long story, but if I was going to give you the cliff notes, I got into a climbing accident and I had 2 surgeries, the second one of which ended my life as I knew it. And I just physically was in such need of help. And so while I was waiting to get the diagnosis, which eventually I did, I literally almost stumbled into sound healing and energy healing, and getting the healings, but also I've discovered, giving the healings was just so magical. And to me, related to the violin in most unusual and unexpected of ways. And then on top of that, the author thing came about because I'd always loved writing as a child, and I used to do it all the time. And then I stopped for, I don't want to say how many years exactly, but a long time. And my teacher had asked me after I started studying with him to help him write his book on violin technique. And at the time, I hesitated because he was such a forceful personality in a good way. And I was like, how can I capture that? And sadly, he passed away. And what he taught was just so special, transformed my playing, allows me to transfer my students' playing. And I realized, well, I have to set this down on paper. And that's how I got interested in your book, because here I was writing a book on violin technique as a way of cementing both his legacy and mine. And then along comes your project, which is the book about leaving your legacy. So it's just so in line with what I was doing. It just felt so aligned and so right.
Beautiful. I never thought of violin as also sound healing. Like, I guess all music is actually sound healing.
Oh, yes. I think all musicians are natural sound healers.
Yeah. I never thought of it that way until you just said that and I was like, oh my God, I've always loved the violin. Like, it has a certain resonance with me. I am not a musician, nor can I read music or do anything else. So I have birthed the musician, which shocks me. But I always loved because there was always music playing in the house because of that, right? They're always composing, they're always doing stuff, and I loved it. Violin is not one of their instruments, but my grandfather played the violin, and that might be my connection to the violin.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, yeah. So, but that was always soothing to me. And I never thought of it until you just mentioned how that could be just as soothing as a crystal bowl to me.
Yeah, because, excuse me, outside I'm a little allergic, but anyway, yes, because even energy healing is all about frequencies. It's been studied scientifically.
Yep.
So of course it makes sense that, the frequencies of anything can resonate within you and wake your body back up to health. And actually, I think, when I didn't even think about it until you mentioned this, but when I was a kid, kind of the moment I think I knew that I loved music above anything was the teacher actually really made me angry. She got angry and it wasn't justified and I felt like it wasn't fair. And I was sitting there all cross, with my arms folded. And, I was in grade school. But there happened to be an assembly that day. And there was a guy pretending to be Beethoven. And he went through his whole life story. He played Furlies, which at the time as a little kid I loved. And, went into how he was deaf and still continued to compose. And I was just so captivated that I forgot I was angry. And afterwards, the teacher's like, so can we discuss this? I was like, discuss what? I completely had forgotten that I was even mad. And so it just has that power to just draw you into another world.
Absolutely. Absolutely does. So, so your chapter title is The Luckiest Girl in the World, with the subtitle, Obstacles Form the Backbone of Your Legacy. You told us a little bit about your obstacles in life, but what was the main thread of your chapter? And by writing it, did you have any aha moments? I know, like, when I never actually know what I'm going to write until it just starts to flow from me. Was it that type of experience for you?
And actually after I did, because writing even though I had a rough draft of my violin book, that's a very technique oriented book. It's very different from telling your life story. So after I wrote it, there's just this floodgate of writing that's come out of me, and these characters, and a lot of them represent the person I wrote about in my chapter. And it's just so amazing how people from your past just suddenly come up and they surprise you.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see your main character looking back at you in the mirror. But I'd say that the common thread in my chapter, well, actually, it unfolded as you asked me to be in the project, because actually, after you asked me, a student of mine, a 10-year-old student, as you'll see in the story, named my chapter. And I was teaching her.
Wonderful.
Yep. And and I was feeling, and I guess we all go there sometimes. It was not a good day with my health problems. I was in pain. I wanted to go home and lie down. And this little 10-year-old girl, and leave it to a kid to be the most insightful about your life. And she goes, I think you're the luckiest girl in the world.
Oh.
And I realized at that moment that had to be my chapter title, because she gave me a completely different outlook on life and just how fortunate I've been in so many of my experiences. And that's the common thread in my chapter, is that all the setbacks I have actually turned into another facet of myself that never would have been tapped into, and that I never would have paid forward to others in a way that, if I hadn't been injured, I wouldn't have. I would have just played the violin, which, don't get me wrong, is wonderful and I love it.
Yeah.
But I also love all these other things that have opened up in addition to it. And I feel like, in a way, add to what you do, add to being a musician.
Yeah. Wow. That alone is an incredible story. I was gonna ask how different it felt for you to write a personal story compared to the technical work you're used to writing.
Yeah, it was the story, the emperor, what's it called? The Emperor's Clothes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Emperor's
That's a little
Cloak,
how I
right?
felt.
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, because I've never really opened up about my health issues publicly. And I've only told a certain amount of people. And even though I didn't go much into it, I revealed some details that were very personal. But I think that was good. I think that then allows you to, then you're not afraid to write about anything.
Yeah. It's very therapeutic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think when you put yourself out there, you're like, okay, I'm out there. Like, what bad can happen now? Because I'm already out there.
And it is. And I find that as I'm writing, one of the things that I'm doing that I love about writing, that's just got me so fired up, is that you can take a situation in life that has been unjust, that didn't have a happy ending, And you can do two things. You can write a happy ending, which is like so powerful because in your audience's mind, that is the ending.
Yeah.
And two, you can use it as a teaching tool
Yeah.
and a technique to transform people, to challenge them to think differently, and to start then giving that happy ending to people by changing the way situations unfold.
Oh, beautiful. So with that, at the end of every chapter, we ask our co-authors to write a little lesson of something that they've learned. Can you give us a little glimpse of what your lesson was like?
Um, my lesson has to do with obstacles and just, it's kind of the whole chapter of my title, or the title of
Yeah.
my chapter, a little backwards today. That, someone said something, in this case, a little 10-year-old girl, and it completely flipped the lens about how I'm framing my life's experiences and even all the misfortune that I
Yeah.
faced.
Yeah.
And so my lesson is about that, is about the lens which you're viewing your past in, and how actually, if you start thinking about it, the things that you think are horrible turn into agents for change and actually really the most powerful parts of your life.
Oh, so true. So true. And I love the idea of just looking at the lens always as a lesson. Like what is the lesson I could learn here? Because sometimes the most tragic things, there's a good thread in there, like a good lesson, something that we're taking from it. And we become more powerful usually from whatever the experience is.
Yeah, I mean, you have to change the lens.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. What a
I
beautiful
can't remember.
lesson. Thank you so much for being a part of it. So if someone was interested in your story, they can pick up our book. Your bio and all of your information will be in our show notes for people that are listening to us. Is there any other way that's a good way for them to get in touch with you if they had any questions?
Sure. I think the easiest is to contact me on Instagram.
Okay.
And there's actually two, I'm going to leave two channels depending on where people's interests are. So one
Okay.
is for the violin side of things, which is called Violin Viola Studio. That's my name on Instagram, or Elana Ray Author for writing.
Oh, I love it. Awesome. Well, Elana, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I
Thanks so
so
much for having me.
appreciate it. All right. So thank you everyone for being a part of our podcast, and Elana for being our special guest. If you loved this interview, please share it with your friends and pick up our book, which is due out September of 2024. You can also join me and others at soulprofessional.com. Once again, a soul professional lives in a higher vibration, has an alternative approach to business, and is here to help repair the world. So if that's you, we hope to see you in our community. And everyone, have a great week, and we'll see you next week.